Okay. Oh, sorry. I got to do it again because it wasn't technically on record. Another thing?
Well, that thing you pounded.
Oh, yeah. That's more than we have for budget, but yeah. So we have a quorum, if I count heads around the room. Thank you for coming to our May 16th TAC meeting for Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments. We do have a quorum, and we will start with introductions. Jason?
Jason Dosh, Town of Palmer Lake.
Aaron? Sorry. So focused.
Aaron Busto, Federal Highways.
Kathleen Collins, CDOT Liaison.
Rick Orphan, Fort Carson.
Rob Fry, CDOT.
Wendy Pettit, CDOT.
Victoria Chavez, El Paso County.
Patty Henshin, CDOT.
Sally Riley, City of Woodland Park.
Amy Kelly, Air Force Academy.
Brian Vituli, City of Colorado Springs, Mountain Metro Transit.
John Santos, Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments.
Brandy Williams, City of Fountain. And we do have a change to our agenda. So item C6, no, 6C. Sorry, 6C was in the packet, but it didn't make it to the actual agenda page. So whenever someone makes a motion for approval, then if they could just add that, that would be fantastic. Can we get a motion to approve the agenda?
Move approval as what is it called? Amended. Yeah, it's a long day.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have an approved agenda. Public comments. Minus the fact that I forgot introductions of the rest of the staff, so my apologies. We'll do this now. Can we do introductions in the audience?
Catherine Wengard, PPACG. Leslie Nicely, CDOT.
Steve Jacobson, Air Force Academy.
Jessica Bechtel, PPACG.
And just in time, as soon as she sits down.
Jennifer Irvin, El Paso County.
And none of you had additional comments you want to add to anything? Perfect. Any comments on the minutes? Can I get a motion to approve? I wasn't here either.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, good. We got a second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. John?
This is the, what happened with the direct, I didn't grab that agenda, I grabbed that one. All right, sorry.
This is the Board of Directors report.
The Board of Directors report, thank you. And I apologize, I didn't grab that one, but I did grab the Board of Directors agenda to make sure I covered all the items. The couple of things that would interest you, under the action items, they had the Citizens Advisory Committee membership process and bylaw change, where they're looking for someone to change their membership to add a different membership. This was all started by Northern El Paso County Citizens. What's the name of that group?
NEPCO, but I don't remember what it's called.
NEPCO. So anyway, so NEPCO had said, yes, we'd like to be on the CAC, and that started that whole process. So you're like, why are you telling us the story, John? It has nothing to do with us. During the actual board meeting, they started talking about bylaws in general and how there are inconsistencies from maybe the TAC to the CAC to the board itself, and the board has certain things. So I think there will be a subcommittee of some of the board members, I believe Commissioner Williams, Council Member Pico, and one other person was on it. Oh, Sharon Thompson, thank you, was going to be on it. And they're going to sort of look at that and then come back with sort of, hey, these are things that we need to add to our different bylaws to make them consistent. I don't think anything will change as far as your membership, but things like calling in and voting and stuff like that may be impacted, or it may not. They might come back and say the TAC bylaws are the model, and we want all of the rest of them to mirror that one. So just wanted to give you a heads up on that. The other things that would maybe be of interest to you, and for the most part, I think we didn't have a tip, but Catherine did bring the 2045 long-range transportation plan chapters So they had an opportunity to look at that. The one thing that came out of that discussion was Commissioner Vanderwerf had said that El Paso County was starting its comprehensive land use master plan and said, you should coordinate, it's a once in a 10-year sort of thing. And I was thinking to myself, well, we're to the end of our process, but I didn't really think it was appropriate for me to say anything to the commissioner. That being said, I'm happy to participate in your process, because your process would then lead into our next plan, and then that way we're doing what he's asked. And quite frankly, we're the tail, you're the dog. So you tell us what you're going to come out of your plan, and we'll move that into the next plan, rather than us telling you what's in our plan and in any way trying to change your plan, because again, that's the wrong way. You guys tell us what you're doing, and we fit it into our plan, not vice versa. Anything else, Catherine, that I'm missing? Or Brian, since you were at the meeting as well, anything else that jumped out at you? I think that concludes the Board of Directors report.
Thank you, John. On to action items. 6A, project cost overrun request and amendment number 9. Catherine?
Number 9.
Good afternoon, Catherine Wingard, Transportation Planner. A couple months ago, we sent out a notification that we had some available CMAQ funds for 2020, and then we also received notice from Mountain Metro Transit that they would not need all of the funds that they had programmed in 2020, and so we have a total amount of $617,072 worth of CMAQ money in 2020 that we sent out that was available. We received 3 applications, and I'll go through those quickly. We have El Paso County for their park and ride, and they've requested the full amount. We have Colorado Springs for their 5 Points Roundabout for $400,000, and Colorado Springs Mountain Metro Transit for their Metro Rides program for $217,072. And I'm happy to open up the floor to the people that are requesting the funds. If you want to talk a little bit about why you're requesting them and tell the group, or I can just...
Well, since I'm first on the list, I'll go.
Might as well.
We're requesting some additional funds for our park and ride project. We ran into a little bit of issue with right-of-way that was supposed to be dedicated to us, that we ended up needing to pay for due to a change in somebody else's policy. So we were just sort of stuck behind the 8 ball on this one, and so we were requesting the full amount. Actually, we probably need more right-of-way money than this, but it will allow us to partially get through that phase and hopefully get our project under construction.
I'll do mine, Tim, while you're settling in. It's a good thing that you're here, since your project's requesting money. So we're requesting, Tim and I coordinated our response to ask for the full amount. Metro Rides is our regional travel demand management program. It's reliant on CMAQ funds and has been for quite some time. And, you know, with CMAQ going away and the I-25 GAP project ramping up, you know, we're looking for any additional funds that we can to beef up that program and hopefully continue it. Since CMAQ isn't really no longer a funding source for us or for this program for a while until that perhaps changes again. So, you know, and we have some staff attached to this program, so it's anything would be appreciated, and I look forward to cooperatively discussing this with our fine colleagues across the aisle, other side of the room. So, thank you.
And the other City of Colorado Springs project is the 5 Points Roundabout project. It's where Cheyenne Boulevard, Tejon Street, Ramona and Cascade, if you're familiar with the area. It was programmed in 2012, so as you can imagine, the costs have increased. We actually do have access to alternative funds. We could use local RTA funds and use some of our citywide project monies towards that. And seeing how we are requesting more than the available CMAQ, that's something that we should definitely consider as we make this decision.
Right, so that was the first part of this memo, and the second part will be once it's decided where the monies are going, we'll need to do a tip amendment number 9, and that also includes the reduce of the funds for the MMT project is the second item on that list, and the third one is another amendment to the tip to add in 3 battery electric buses and 3 chargers with the money that MMT received from the Volkswagen settlement and some faster funds. So that's the second portion of that.
So we'll probably just do 2 motions for that, just to make it crystal clear.
Yes, the first motion for the first table and another one sounds good to me.
Anybody want to weigh in on Brian?
So Victoria, do you have any other sources, or is there a minimum amount that you would need here? Because I can certainly reduce. I mean, we just accepted $51,000 a couple months ago for the Metro Rides program. So anything we get would be appreciated. So, I'll gladly reduce this amount to hopefully distribute it between the 3 of us in some way.
I don't know the number off the top of my head.
I think similarly to the city of Colorado Springs.
Jennifer, can you turn your microphone on, please?
Right. Sorry, it's been a while. I have a great deputy who's my primary, but Jennifer Irvin, El Paso County, we would have to go back and look towards PPRTA as a possibility, and then also looking at, with this, we'd look at a match from the county anyway, so we don't really have anything in our road and bridge budget, so any delta would have to be filled through PPRTA.
Sorry, go ahead, Wendy.
So how much do you need? Do you need the 400,000? Do you need less? Do you need more?
I actually think we need more than the 600 we're asking for.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's closer to almost $1 million.
So, to help us move forward, I would suggest we take at least the 400,000 for the roundabout off the table.
Oh, that would be very generous.
Okay?
Thank you.
So that'll help us narrow it down to the 2.
Is there a minimum you can go down to, Brian?
Well, like I said, we'll take whatever. Want to give us another 50 or 75? I mean, that would be fine.
Wendy?
So, it's year-end time, and as that process moves forward and projects are closed out and whatnot, I don't know exactly what the dollar amount is of projects that may or may not be closed here soon, but there could be some project savings from that, and I have to go back and verify numbers, but from what I can tell, there could be around $200,000 of funding in the CMAQ pool that's being returned. I don't know what the details are. I have to go back and check with the business office to make sure it's really all available and that it's not just sitting there in a holding pattern for some reason or another to be rebudgeted. But if that was the case, then that would make your request whole to go to the TDM and make their request whole, and if you're going to withdraw, then that makes everybody whole then, right?
It would.
Except for Brian hasn't actually mentioned withdrawing. But go ahead, John.
No, Tim.
I know Tim did, yeah.
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 But just Wendy, so I can clarify, since we're the ones that will have to process this, are you recommending that at this point, for the 600,000, whatever it is, that it goes to El Paso County?
No, I'm not recommending because that's not my
Oh,
job.
I'm sorry. Are you
She's
suggesting
giving us information.
So-
Because there should be other monies.
Yes,
that,
I
again,
am suggesting that that other money is a real possibility to go to Mountain Metro, so that would make El Paso County's request whole, and it would be good to move forward with the CMAQ money that way, because then it would all be programmed again.
And again, because this is monies that we have to.
Correct.
Hurry up and get obligated, that we hit Jennifer Header.
Can I see that? Yeah. Jennifer?
Just a couple questions for your TDM. When do you need to get that? I mean, is there a timeline for that?
Well, I mean, I don't want to use this term loosely, but, I mean, since we don't have a further funding source, we're trying to watch our funds, we're trying to stockpile whatever funds we can to keep the program solvent for whatever time that we need it. So, I mean, we're good for now, and if there's possibility of more money coming, we could certainly wait. But I think we're somewhat limited, I mean, because I don't think you can use STP Metro for operations, right? Operations of a program, like Metro Rides. You can't use TAP, right?
I think we'd have to look into that, because my recollection, I don't know if I'm doing, sorry. My recollection is that STP dollars, or STP Metro, is the most flexible of the federal dollars, and you would be able to operate a travel reduction program. In fact, anything that is travel reduction oriented, you could reduce the match from the 17.21 down to 0 if it's approved by our federal funding partners. So typically, those congestion management activities not only are eligible, but have a reduced match. But Aaron, you might know far better than I.
Yes, I do know far better than you. Thank you. But not by much.
And I'm going to tell you.
The 100% for CMAQ funds is for specific safety projects, and there's a list of them. They might be considered under other categories in safety, but we call them safety projects, so you'd have to look at that. STP, I know it's a very long list of eligible activities. We just have to go back and see if it's there or not. And I would say that any CMAQ money used for transit operations does have a limit of 5 years, so we need to consider that. I'm not sure how long this program's been going on or getting CMAQ funding for the operations, but there's a limit, so.
I would suggest, Brian, that we fully fund the city's request, and then the county would take the remaining. We're okay with that. We both have some.
No, I'm okay waiting.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you guys need it more than we do.
We're pretty gosh darn close to going to construction.
Yeah.
And I've never seen Wendy, get our hopes up and then not come through with something. So if you are willing to wait, we would be so appreciative.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, we're good.
Okay, then I will just go ahead and make the motion that El Paso County gets all the money.
We get some of Colorado Springs to say that. It'd be so nice.
I wouldn't go on record with it, so.
Jason, you live close to Colorado Springs.
I will second that motion.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now,
abstain because I feel like I didn't
that
get
is
full context. So.
perfectly fine, and
Okay.
we may or may not note that. I'll leave that up to Jessica. And now we will, I think we should be ready enough.
Before we
for
move
our
on, is there a way to
second motion?
note that through?
Yeah, I would absolutely support doing that in our meeting minutes, that any available extra money from CMAQ, that Mountain Metro get first consideration.
Yeah, thank you. And I know we can't, we got to compare if the money's become available, but I would just hate for the board or the CAC to come and say, why is this just going one location? And I'd like some clarity that how we came to this location.
Right, and again, as long as we're clear, and again, that we can put those in the meeting minutes, and those meeting minutes become of record, but they are in no way binding. That obviously the federal process has to be dealt with every time any new funding comes in. So this is one of those things that's like, you all, as long as you're all around the table, the next time it happens, someone can remember that and do it. But by no means can this body bind a future body or any part of the federal process. That being said, we'll make sure that the minutes are duly noted what the discussion was.
And if they ask, I'll make sure, sometimes they ask me how they came to the conclusion of who got what money, and I can bring that up as well if that's desired.
And John, if you and your staff could check into what other sources, because I thought I remember that operations-related expenses like traffic signal operations, I thought was not fundable by STP Metro because it was operations-related.
Right.
But if you could check into that, I mean, we'll take whatever we can get eligible.
And again, it's based on how the rules are interpreted, federal region to federal region. So we'll do a little homework, and then we'll talk to Aaron and figure it out. But again, my recollection was, as a travel demand strategy, those travel reduction programs are eligible on a consistent basis and not with a cap. That being said, I've been doing this for 15-plus years. The rules have changed from thing to thing, so I could have read something 10 years ago, and Aaron read something from 2 years ago, and he's right. So we'll look into it, and we'll get the most current understanding of what funding eligibility you have.
Okay, thank you.
So now can we get a motion for the tip amendment number 9, please? And Catherine, do you want to restate what all that needs to contain?
Sure. It's just a recommendation to the Board of Directors to approve Amendment 9 with the updated project requests that are listed.
She did that so well. So moved.
And a second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item 6B, the public participation plan. I think we're going to just tap John on this
All right,
one.
I guess if Jason's not hiding back there. All right. So at your last meeting, Jason came and gave you the presentation on the public participation plan. It went to the board last month as a draft, so it's coming back to you today as an action item, and hopefully we're asking for you to recommend approval of the public participation plan to then send on to the CAC next week and then to the board for their June meeting. I believe, yes, that when we first sent it out back in February, it was part of the three plans, the public participation plan, the environmental justice plan, and the Title VI, or limited English plan. We pulled this one back because Aaron had a bunch of great comments, so we've included those comments. I believe those comments were all incorporated in that first draft that you had seen. So nothing has changed from the draft that you saw last month to this month. So given that, happy to answer any questions or see if someone can run upstairs and find Jason.
I think I saw him drive in, but we
Oh.
also didn't receive any public comments.
Oh, thank you. And we have not received any public comments. So to the extent you wish to discuss it or have any comments, great. If not, we're looking for a motion to recommend approval so we can take it to the CAC next week.
I motion that we recommend approval of the public participation plan.
Second.
Jennifer. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now the mysterious item 6C.
Yeah, and my apologies. Ultimately, it comes down, apparently they hand me things. I'm supposed to actually read them before I say, yeah, it's good to go out. So if it was my fault, I apologize. So hopefully no one is too terribly put out. In fact, most of the time I would probably just say, hey, I made a mistake. Let's just hold this. But CDOT does have a schedule that we're trying to stick to. So if you're amenable to it, if it doesn't make anybody's spidey sense go off that it wasn't actually on the agenda, I would like to see if we can't move forward. This again is an item that you've seen once before as a and it was in the packet. Thank you. the actual document itself was in the packet as well as the memo. It just didn't make it onto the agenda. So if you read through the packet, you would have seen it, so hopefully it's not too much of a surprise. Again, you saw it last month as a draft. This month, we're asking for your approval, so I can, again, take it to CAC next week, and then to the board in June. The only real differences in this was, from the version you saw to this one, is I added a little bit where we had sort of some blanks and some highlighted in yellow sections on the environmental planner. I went back and filled those in, basically going back and stealing the federal language for the focus areas on the environment and making sure that those were hit there. And then I believe that in the memo that we received from CDOT setting our consolidated planning grant funds, there was about an additional $26,000 in the second year. So I ended up putting that under consultant services, again, understanding that we're having lots of discussions on things like pavement preservation and traffic counts and things like that, so that we would have the ability, although I think we would still need to do an amendment next year to specifically name those things, but by not putting them someplace where it would be a hassle to move them, they're there sort of waiting for the region to continue those discussions, so we have those funds available to do that. And so with that, if you have the opportunity to read it, happy to answer any questions. And again, if anyone is nervous about moving forward, we can. I would ask that we can happy to send this out again. And then if you give me any comments, I can bring those comments up at the CAC meeting next week to have everything move forward. But with that, Madam Chair, happy to take any questions.
Anybody have any questions for John? Does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll move that we recommend approval of the FY 2020 to 2021 Unified Planning Work Program.
Second?
Any more conversation? Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item 7A. So used to that. The CDOT Build Grant Application Presentation. Catherine.
And that was just a placeholder for CDOT, so have that.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Rob Fry.
Thank you. Yeah, Rob Fry with CDOT. I'll do my best. I'm not real good with process and procedure, but I'll give it a go. So on April 22nd, U.S. Department of Transportation sent out a notice of funding opportunity for a build discretionary grant. And CDOT, along with El Paso County, is moving forward with a group of projects, 4 primary projects in the MPO area here. And so they're outlined here. You've got 6 projects kind of bulleted on in your package here, but it really consists of 4 major components. So the first one is I-25 from South Academy Boulevard down to Fountain, and that is to widen, not widen, I shouldn't use that word, is to reconstruct that roadway from asphalt to concrete, but to widen the shoulders. Currently, the shoulder width in there, I believe, is 4 feet on the inside and 10 feet on the outside shoulders, and we'd like to have 12-foot shoulders both inside and outside. I'm looking over at Leslie, making sure I'm getting this right. And then we'd also be looking at replacing the bridges at over South Academy Boulevard there as well, and then also a potential bridge work in that corridor further to the south. So that's kind of one project. The second project is including the Academy widening project. That's part of the PPRTA program already, and that's to widen it from pretty much I-25, just west of I-25. Sorry, I grew up in a different state, so the mountains are on the other side, so I get confused. To Bradley?
East to Bradley.
Yeah, east of Bradley Road, 6-lane it, which much of it already is 6-lane, but it's kind of filling in those gaps there. And then another project is tied with that is down at Charter Oak Ranch Road, is to finally construct that as well. That's been a big issue with everyone trying to get into Fort Carson at Gate 20. This would provide an alternate route in there and help with the congestion that we see there every morning. And then the final one is State Highway 94 improvements. That's been a big hot item here recently, and we're looking at addressing that. So we're looking at adding westbound passing lanes in that section. And then also, I don't know what the official hill name is. We keep calling it Trash Hill. But there's a conflict there with getting into the waste management there and looking at making improvements to the Brandley Road? Blaney, thank you, Blaney Road. That goes into the waste management site there. So those are the four main projects, and really tying it all together around supporting the military as well and providing that alternate route and redundant route for our military folks. So that's it in a nutshell. It's we're requesting $25 million in the grant from the federal government. I know it's over 100. I think it's 124 million is our estimate at the moment, total project, and a lot of it's been from local state funds. So it's a pretty fast burn on this. Like I said, it was April 22nd. The grant application is due July 15th. So I think we're going to be going to the board here on June 12th and asking for a letter of support. So I guess I'm asking this body for a recommendation that you support this and would like to move that on to the board.
Well, first of all, I want to thank CDOT for working with us on this project. These would be some terrific improvements for our entire region, not just for the county or for the state, but everybody, almost everybody travels one of those roadways at some point during the week. So thank you for working with us on this, and I will happily move forward support of this build grant.
Any other, Brian?
I just wanted to bring up a comment. So my manager went to the CDOT, PPACG, City County Coordination meeting last week, and so this was talked about a little bit. And he mentioned, last cycle for the build application, last year the city submitted for a total build out of the Academy Hancock reconstruction. This was a BPL study that was done several years ago. So the build application was to finish everything that was outlined in the BPL. I think we have about $2 million program in 2021 and 2022 for like phase one improvements for that. But the build application included everything. And I think Craig mentioned last week that there was if this is far enough along that it's just going forward like this, or would it be possible to, go a little bit further north on Academy to include all of what was outlined in the Academy Hancock PPL? Is that still an option? And I think you mentioned some people saying, well, do you have any money that you could bring to it? So, we obviously have whatever was outlined last time we submitted for match.
Brian, can you turn your microphone? That's okay.
Do I have to repeat all of that?
No. Jessica might need to.
Thank you.
The minutes will say, and Brian's still.
Right, yeah. So I guess, is it still an opportunity to piggyback on this project? Because, I think city staff met yesterday to talk about potential build applications, and us submitting Academy Hancock came up again. So, it's an easy application to submit because it's already written, but would it be more competitive to add something like that to what's already outlined here?
Yeah, I remember we had that discussion, I think, at our El Paso County City meeting last week, and I'll ask, I think Jennifer was there to help me along. But we did have that discussion, and John was there too. We did have that discussion. I think it's about a mile mile and a half further beyond the limits. So that was a concern as well. And then trying to really tie it in with the theme of military support on this project, and then trying to get that cost-benefit analysis included in supporting it. So my response is, could we do it? We could, but we don't think it'd make the grant more competitive. It may take away from kind of that military support component of it, so.
Okay. All right. Just thought I'd ask.
Yeah, no.
I would just add, Brian, I think the problem is that we're maxed out on the number that we can ask for the federal government at this point. Really, the South Academy project from the county standpoint is not asking for any of that federal dollars. It's really put in there to kind of help support and show local money for that and kind of to tie it all in together. So I think really the money that we're asking from the federal government is really going towards to support the I-25 work, and then a little bit towards the Charter Oak Ranch Road, for which we have, a small delta. So I think the problem is that there's not enough, we can't go above that $25 million.
Yeah, $25 million is the max
Yeah.
we can request.
Yeah, all right, thanks.
Tim?
So this, did I miss something? Is this an information item or an action item?
It looks very informational, but I think he's probably looking for a head nod. John was just going to say that.
Because I was just wondering, because we have our build grant too that we're going to be submitting for. So do we bring it to this group also? Is that?
Do you want a letter of recommendation from the board?
Is that, I don't know.
I think that's why this item is coming, is so that we can give them some.
Letter of recommendation.
Right, basically to say we are in support of it, and we would not be adversarial if the board gave him a letter of support. So if you guys wanted a letter of support, I would assume it would go through the same process.
Yeah, okay.
You see anything?
You just keep nodding.
And I think we're still at the point where we're not, really not even sure we're going to submit, but we did talk about it yesterday, and there is time. I mean, if we need to do July board, right? It would be July board, so, to get a letter, so, okay.
Okay, so since we are doing head nods, is there any head nodding no, or are all heads nodding yes? Okay. Any other discussion on this item? Thanks, Catherine / Rob in disguise. Yep, I got John.
Well, just one other quick thing. I just remembered Darren Horstmeyer from Schriever came by yesterday. He had some VIPs come into town, so he was not able to be here. But obviously, he wanted to make sure you knew that Schriever was very thankful and supportive of this. So now I can tell him that I actually remembered what he said and I repeated it for him. I think he's going to actually try to be at the CAC to hear the presentation as well, since he wasn't able to be here today. So I wanted to pass that along. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll go on to 7B, which Catherine may actually present, the TIP policies and procedures document comments.
I will talk this time. Thank you. Catherine Wenger, Transportation Planner. This is the TIP policies and procedures draft that you've seen once before, and we gave you some time to review and add some comments. And we did receive some from Federal Highway and a few other members as well. So thank you very much. And that was incorporated into this new draft that there's a link to. And I wanted to get your feedback on, so this is just an information item this month, and we plan to bring it back next month for action. But I wanted to see if you wanted me to go through and kind of select which options we like, and if we like the suggestions that we received from the committee, or if you want to just reread over this again, and then we select those options at the final action time next month. So I wanted to see what the procedure is.
I have a vote that we're almost done, thank goodness gracious. So if we could do this now.
Do it now?
That would
Okay.
be fast. Moving right along. Any objections? Okay, thank you.
And I'll try to make it quick. Okay, so on the memo, we have option A, which is an original policy, and then there's this option B, the suggested new policy regarding projects that are consistent with instead of listed in the long-range plan, are eligible to be in the TIP. And this is just a small change to say that consistent with, instead of actually having to be directly listed into the document.
Option B. This is my suggestion.
Okay.
Are there any pitfalls that no one knows about with that option B wording? I mean, it seems great, but I just want to make sure we're good to go.
Yeah, this is sort of the thing that when I first got here that kind of facilitated it was very sort of set in stone that you had to have it specifically named. That was not a federal rule, that was a PPACG rule. So this kind of takes it from aiming the pistol towards our foot out where, anyway, that's probably a bad analogy at this point, but it was unnecessary, it was self-inflicted, and so we're happy to hear that the consistent with is something that you guys would like to see.
I do have one question about that.
Sure.
I haven't been through this full TIP process before, so it'll be a learning curve for me, but I just wondered, will the term consistent provide enough direction if you're evaluating a number of different projects that might come in?
Good question.
Yes. So this doesn't allow us to take the full long-range plan and say, hey, we can just put in a line in there that says, transportation projects, and then be done. Because the rules say, again, because we've all agreed that Aaron knows far better than I do, but I think you would agree that it basically says if it's capacity building, if it's a capacity project, you have to have very specific information of where it starts, where it ends, what you're going to do. So nothing changes there. Anything that's there, you still need to go through that, and you have to be very specific in what you do. So it doesn't create a catch-all for everything. But what it does allow is for things like safety projects, region-wide, and for bicycle and pedestrian things region-wide. It allows us to sort of have these other categories that does not mean that if you get like a $20,000 TAP grant, we're going to have to go back and amend the long-range plan to be able to build that project because we were overly constrictive in our methodology. So it allows enough flexibility for us to do the little things without having to make a big federal case of it. But at the same time, it doesn't damage the federal intent of, for those things that are big projects that are capacity proving, you still have to give very detailed and specific scope of work for those items.
Okay, thanks.
All right, I'll move on to the next item unless anyone does not want me to make that as the formal suggestion next month. Okay. So the PO 8.0 or 8.0 is suggested new policy. There's not an original one in the document. And this says that the SDP Metro and the TAP funds have a use it or lose it policy, and therefore the funds that are not obligated in that year of the programmed year, that money that can be lost to the region. So to help mitigate this possibility, the TIP shall have an appendix with a prioritized listing of regional projects for 5 through 10 years, and then we would call that the unscheduled pool, which can be amended into the current TIP years if funding were to become available, or if we need possibly one project goes back into cannot finish, and then we can possibly have more projects to move forward. So below that, it discusses more about this unscheduled pool, which allows jurisdictions to plan and space out projects into phases, possibly. It will be listed by year, and Victoria asked, would this be, because we said it doesn't need to be fiscally constrained, but it suggested that it is, and Victoria asked, does that need to be constrained by year or by total amount in the unscheduled pool? My suggestion would be the full amount, just so that we're not constraining ourselves by year. But that's another question to consider with this unscheduled pool, is if we do have it fiscally constrained based on estimates we have from the long-range plan, do we want that to be by year or just by the pool, the 5-year pool? And then kind of 8.3, it does not guarantee funding. The unscheduled pool doesn't guarantee funding, nor does it guarantee a project will automatically advance. It just gives us an idea of the future years that might be advanced later on and see how those are progressing. And does also kind of align with the new STIP policy that's coming. They're going to do a more tenured STIP, so it does help in that process, kind of align with the CDOT process as well.
And for the record, we did it first before CDOT, I'm just saying.
Wendy?
I have a question for you. So, in perfect world, we get money obligated as soon as it's awarded in that year, in a perfect world. But we run into things sometimes that cause us not to be able to do that. So how will you set the rules for making that process work?
Well, there is an outline later on in the document that outlines if we have extra funds for the region, it says what those priorities are. And the first priority is for cost overruns, as we don't usually go beyond that first priority. And so there are a list of different priorities that we go over, I think, in one of these next items, but that's how those are handled, is we don't automatically go into that unscheduled pool. That's listed in the priority list.
So you'll take money from a tipped project and give it to a project that's got a cost overrun?
No, that's
what you're telling me.
I thought you were asking if we had extra funds that don't get.
No.
So if you have a project that doesn't get obligated during that first year, or for some reason can't meet that requirement, how are you going to, are there exceptions? How are you going to enforce that process?
Right. Well, I think the first thing is, it's all about making sure that we deliver the program. So we don't want to be too tied up in having a whole bunch of very strict, rigid rules.
Right.
However, we want to have predictability,
Sure.
so none of the jurisdictions think that they're being treated unfairly. Actually, I shouldn't say think that they are, that they're not treated unfairly because, we have a different group of people around the table, right? So we want to have, that's the reason for having these, is that sort of consistent thing. But that being said, I think the very first thing is, if we have money that's going to go bad, our number one priority is to make sure that that money doesn't leave the region. And so the very first thing is you say, okay, how do you keep the project that couldn't go whole? And that's the first thing you have to look at. If that project is just no longer a priority or can no longer happen, so we were going to build a bridge and environmental folks say you can't build that bridge here ever. So if the project is totally scrapped, it's removed from the tip, and we don't have to worry about finding money for it in the back years, well, then we have that funding available. So the first thing is, and again, I would treat this just like sort of this money is now coming back into the pool. It's available for everything. And the first thing is projects that are underway that have a shortfall. Because again, if I've got a project that needs a couple of $1 million and isn't going to obligate its $10 million, I'm going to throw that, again, I shouldn't say you guys make the decisions, but I would think it would be one of those things that we'd be happy to make sure that we deliver that $10 million project by adding the extra couple million to it because we now have funding available. Beyond that, after we do the cost overrun sort of thing, make sure we're delivering those things that are in that first year. Then the funds come back to sort of slide down the line. Then we look at year 2 and say, what projects are ready to move forward or could move forward, at least have their design or their right-of-way or something like that move forward a year. Because again, we're trying to focus on phases as that's the overall direction that we've been getting. So any of those phases that are in year 2, if money is available, those slide forward. This pool, what do we call it again? I'm sorry.
Unscheduled.
This unscheduled pool, those are probably maybe not the first thing that moves in, but as that sort of shift happens and we're being, resourceful in making sure that everything slides forward, then all of a sudden we can say, hey, in year 4 of the TIP, because we've moved some of these other things around, we have some capacity. What do we want to move forward? So that way, and it gives people that sort of thing that they can be working on stuff and knowing that it has some opportunity to move in. Because if they don't have that, that's like, well, what do we work on? How much do we work on? It gives those jurisdictions that. Back to my original thing, and I apologize if I'm going a little too long on this, is sort of it's a great project, but it can't go now. It has to give up its money. Well, then again, how far back does it need to get pushed? Does it just get pushed back a year? Does it get past 2 years? Once we know that, and we can move things forward to make sure that that money is used, then what other sort of arrangements do we need to make sure that that project is kept whole? My philosophy, and hopefully, again, it's your philosophy as a group, is if a project sponsor comes in and is perfectly honest and says, I can't do this, that they're not punished for that. Because if we have a culture where it's like, oh, yeah, I might not be able to do that, and we're punitive, and we say, we're going to take all your funding and send you to the back of the line, and you can come back in 10 years, people aren't going to be as straightforward with it as. So we want to make sure we encourage folks to come forward and say, here's my problem, let's solve it as a region. We solve it as a region. So we can just move them back a couple of years. That's what we would do. So hopefully I've sort of answered your question.
When does this go into effect?
These policies and procedures?
Well, how will you implement it? Because during the first year, you can't really do anything till you get to the end of that first year. So then you're going into year 2. So you really don't have it obligated during the first year because they have until June to get that done.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody waits till the obligation deadline to say that they're not going to obligate, that's kind of painful. And then I would say, well, we'd have to look at, again, whatever your philosophy is what we'll do. But mine would be, let's make sure that the money isn't lost. So what sort of very quick to obligate sort of activities are there? There's flexing to transit, which is relatively easy and can be done, that it can happen quickly. There is design funds that usually can happen relatively quickly, and there are studies. So if there's a giant sort of regionally significant route study that you all want to do, that's also very easily obligated. That being said, again, hopefully we have a culture by which Catherine is nagging, checking in with the jurisdictions often, and it's not going to be at the last minute. And again, hopefully there's a culture of, hey, we're 6 months out or 8 months out, and I know I can't do this, that it's not given to us at the last minute.
So I think that what we've worked on so far over the course of this year will definitely be able to move us forward into that process without any problem. Another thing I want you to also keep in mind is that we might have to do some tweaking to your process because there's a new process that Jeff Sudemeyer, who is the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer of CDOT, that they're working on something along those lines too, some sort of rules and regulations about the MPOs and how they spend money and how fast they obligate and some other things. So we may have to meld those two processes together as time moves forward.
And as far as that goes, one thing I think maybe we're not mentioning is that we typically let or have let the members roll forward the money year after year and continue that to kind of have that money held for them. That's not always the case in every MPO, and that's something we need to decide that if we're allowed to by CDOT, is that something we still want to allow? And at what point do we say, they're not getting this money spent, we need it to go back into the pool? So that's kind of a different look on that, but I think that's what you're getting at is do we roll over that money or do we send it back to the pot?
And again, I think, again, it's all up to you, but I would assume that you want to be as flexible as you can be. So we're certainly not, as staff, going to have anything that makes this, it's difficult to build projects. I picked that up in my years doing this, right? Between all of the environmental and the right-of-way and all these other things, the last thing you need is some bureaucrat sitting at 14 Chestnut or wherever I'm at saying, oh, no, you've got to do it this way. So,
Is CDOT asking MPOs and jurisdictions for input on their change in policies that Jeff is looking at?
I don't know.
I haven't heard about this until now.
May I suggest that we suggest that he seek some input maybe from existing MPOs and people that have been doing this?
We can suggest that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And anyway, to the bigger picture, I think if everyone's comfortable, again, not trying to get ahead of ourselves, but if everyone's comfortable with these policy and procedures, and we do make a recommendation to adopt them next month, if CDOT comes up with some different rules, just like when the new federal transportation reauthorization happens and they change the rules, we'll come back and say, hey, we need to adjust these policies. It's not going to be a one and done. Every year we'll come back and review. Plus, best laid plans of mice and men, we could certainly have these rules and there could be nothing that CDOT changes or nothing FHWA changes, but the members around this table could say, yeah, we understand why we had this rule and we thought it was a great idea, but in reality it's not. Again, then the members themselves can come back and say, we'd like to change this or that. And again, every year we'll come back and tweak it, I'm sure. Keep going, kid.
Oh, can I just say something? In terms of the changes that Wendy's talking about, I think Jeff just took some of them to the TC, so that information would be in the TC packet for May,
Okay.
in case you want.
The meeting that happened yesterday.
It's just a change of the format of the budgets that CDOT's putting out, and that may influence what the MPOs are doing as well.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, any other questions on P0? You have a comment now?
No, I do not.
P08.0. Okay, then I have one. How are we going to come up with a prioritized list, since we're so good at making up lists and reasons that this project gets ranked before that project? So how does that play in?
Well, since this won't be really a prioritized, the list, the unscheduled pool won't be.
Except for you wrote it down as
Did
a
we write-
prioritized list. I mean,
Did we
minus
write-
that, it's exactly not.
Oh, sorry, not fiscally constrained.
Yes, correct.
All right, fiscally. I figure the idea would be to take all the projects that you submitted and the ones that don't make it into the main tip years or the first 4 years of the tip will then be prioritized the same way that you prioritize them in the tip. They would just then go in sequence in the years
Okay,
following.
so this is assuming we eventually have scoring that we all are happy with, and it will just take the ranked order that they were in, and once we get to the fiscally constrained line, then we take those projects and they become our end scheduled pool, and the amounts of those projects will based upon and we still didn't answer this, a total amount. I think we like the total amount better than the annual amount.
Okay.
So if you could do the total amount, then
Sure.
that will cut it off. So if you could put that it's prioritized based upon our scoring of all the other projects, and we don't have to
Yes.
prioritize it separately, that would help.
Definitely.
Any objections? Okay, it's all yours, Catherine.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so then PO 9.0, option A, the original policy talks about the project in its entirety, including pre-construction and construction phases, can be requested requested, selected, and listed all in 1 year of the tip, or the project can be programmed by phase in separate years with the assumption that the construction phase funds will be available. And so the new suggested policy would be, unless the project can be completely designed and or do pre-construction and construction all in 1 year, then we are suggesting that it be projects be phased by pre-construction and then construction in either the next year or the year after that, or possibly if it's in the pre-construction's in the later years, then it goes into the end schedule pool, just so that we have an idea of that there is another part of that project that is in there. So that's kind of the overview of that language for P 9.0. The project selection would continue to look over the entire project when scoring, so it still takes into account the entire project and it doesn't separate it. And you can apply for funding in the project for its entirety, but we're liked it to be programmed by phase so that we can make sure that we get those projects moving and we're not moving them from year to year like we have been.
So that makes sense until you get to number 2, and then it says the subsequent phases are going to get put in the unscheduled pool. That seems a little worrisome, because if you're doing pre-construction, you're ready to go to the next phase and the next phase, and it's not on the fiscally constrained list, how am I supposed to pull it from the unscheduled to the fiscally constrained list?
That would then occur in a new call for projects. So that actually, I probably should fix that language. It'd be either in subsequent years or in the unscheduled pool. So it can be listed. So if you get selected for pre-construction in 2021, let's say, and you can do construction in 2022, then that's fine. But if it's your pre-construction's in 2022, we don't have another out year, so then it goes into the unscheduled pool just as a placeholder, saying this project is in line to be moved up with the next call for projects.
So being the least knowledgeable person here, does that make sense to the people who've been here longer than I do? I have?
It probably needs just a little tweaking.
Right,
Okay.
we can tweak it, but obviously, if you have a project that's going to have design and everything is going to take a year and a half, you put that in 1 year, and then 2 years later you put it, so years 1 and 3 or 1 and 4 in the tip. If you've got that same project, but it's not going to start until year 3, there is no year 6 to put it in, so we put it in the unscheduled.
Okay, that
That's-
makes sense. Right, just as
but
long as we're
we'll-
talking year 6 and not
Yeah.
somewhere in those 4 years. Right,
Yeah.
Okay.
But I like the observation.
okay.
I also think you need to put something on the application.
Can you turn on your microphone, because I don't see it glowing
Sorry.
red?
I think that you need to put something in the application, so that way if you are putting it, let's say we're doing four-year call for projects and the construction money needs to be in year 5, that way as the staff is looking at those documents, they need to know that so that it can be accounted for.
Okay. I think, that's a housekeeping thing, or, yeah. We'll
Yeah.
we'll do that.
Yeah.
Just something to note when the process starts later. Okay. And we have 9.3 is a continuation of that. 10 o'clock. I just want to make sure I'm not repeating myself. Okay, and then, so, yeah, 9.3 is a continuation of the phasing, so I won't go into that.
So is it the initial cost estimate of the whole project, or is it the initial cost estimate of each phase?
It's the initial cost of the whole project can go in, but if it's more than, if it exceeds more than 10% of the original project estimate,
And that's the
you're coming,
total project,
yeah.
not the phases of the project.
Um,
And I would like to know how you guys are going to track that.
That's a good question. But if-
I don't have it in front
It's
of me, so we'll
10% either way, does it matter?
Well, 10% of this piece, which is $100,000, is different than 10% of the whole thing.
But
I-
if it were phased, though, it's still 10% of this number
But
and
the-
10%.
right, but
So
it's
the
up-
total number is still the 10%, so I'm not
But-
sure that it
But if
matters.
it, well.
I get
as long
what
as
you're
it doesn't
saying, and
matter to
I think,
Catherine.
I think by phase would be better because we are talking about coming back with the construction
Right.
phase,
So
so
if I
if
get
that's
to do
increased by
10%
10.
of 600,000, it's a longer time before I get to the fact that I am deficient. If I do 10% of 100,000, I'm going to hit that threshold a lot sooner. So it's just whether or not I have to come back or need to come back, or I do have to follow these rules. Correct. It's 10% of
I hear you.
it either way.
But the timing matters.
But if there's a
Yeah.
threshold that I'm hitting that's making me do one of those bullets, I'm going to hit it faster if it's by phase.
Right, I hear that.
Okay. And I think a clarification that that's 10% over the construction cost, because you'll already be in the first phase, which is, this is what that's alluding to, is that you're coming back. You might have to come back for the construction phase so thank you.
And then we could pick whichever one is most advantageous to us. So Tim's usually good on that math, so he can help.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll have to look at that.
All right. Now we move on to 10.0 or 10.0. So this is a suggested new policy, didn't have one before. So non-infrastructure programs or planning studies that are regional in nature, such as like a corridor study or a congestion corridor study, must be included both in the TIP and the UPWP. This is just a requirement, federal highway requirement for us. So we ask that requests be included in the UPWP, and they have to be made to PPACG in writing by January of the fiscal year so that we can add that into our UPWP that gets approved around July. And then we also, 10.2 is talking about annual programmatic funding is not guaranteed, kind of suggesting that we don't want you to make sure, or to kind of hire someone saying that they will be able to work on this study year after year. But these funds are a year-by-year basis, and so don't plan on them being a permanent solution. And that's 10.0.
Any questions?
Okay, I have a planning study already in the TIP. And when we did the UPWP, we said if it's in the TIP, it didn't need to be in the UPWP. So you might want to take my HSIP planning study and put it in the UPWP now.
Oh, okay.
Because I personally, I don't call it regional in nature, but I guess it kind of could be perceived as regional in nature, but
Okay.
just so you have your boxes checked.
We'll put that in there before, well,
Thank
probably
you.
it's going to already go to the CAC, but before it goes to the board, we'll fix that.
Okay.
So, thank you, sorry about that.
Okay. 11.1, this is from a suggestion from Federal Highway. we're talking about tip amendments here, and we call them major revisions. So anytime I come up here and ask for a tip amendment, it's considered a major revision. And a lot of the times that just means anytime it's changed in federal funds or any major projects that will affect the entire region, or if there's a change in the scope of the project. So there's a broad range of items that we actually consider a tip amendment, as opposed to a small a tip administrative change, which I don't come to you with because it's not a major change in funds or fund source or project. So the question for Federal Highway was, what is our threshold that we consider a major change? And for DRCOG, for instance, or for other MPOs, like DRCOG, it's a $5 million threshold, so that's their major change. In Oklahoma City, In Oklahoma City, it was if the project increases by 20% or if it's over $1 million change, whichever is higher or lower, whatever it was. So there are some different thresholds out there. There's no one requirement, is my understanding, but they're looking for that. What creates a major change, or what causes a major change considered? Yeah.
Correct. We don't have any specific numbers, but when I read this, change in funding, I mean, if you changed $1, you have to go through your public involvement process, get board approvals, do this entire thing just to change $1.
Yeah.
I don't know why you'd want that. But if that's what you want, I'm not going to say anything else, and I'll just shut up. But it seemed to me like there could be some more thresholds in here to trigger an amendment, which is a larger process than the administrative change, you call it?
Yes.
Yeah, the change. So that was my comment, that maybe some consideration should be given to a threshold, and that's all I said.
Good comment.
Definitely.
Wendy? Thanks, John.
That policy was put in place by your board some time ago, so you have new board members around the table. Maybe it's time to revisit the policy.
Well, and this will go to the board eventually, so this is the vehicle by which we can say, we believe it should be $1 million or $5 million or whatever you guys are comfortable with making that recommendation. But I totally agree with he who knows far better than I that we don't want to leave it as just $1 because that would be awful.
I like the $5 million.
Jennifer?
Just having been here for a while, I mean, the reason why, just to give a little history, the reason why that was added in is that because at one point we didn't have even an ability to do an administrative change. So essentially, we wrote some criteria, I think, for the administrative change and kind of left the major change alone. So I think that's why it happened that way, but I agree, if we can be more flexible, that's a good thing.
I heard one vote for $5 million.
I vote 5.
And I will say that for our region, it might mean that you never get to see me up here for a tip amendment, and it'll be really sad. No, that it might be high, but it's just a matter of what you guys think is reasonable.
Oh, come on, somebody else has an opinion.
Well, John has something to say.
No, I was just going to say, if we've only heard $5 million, that's what we'll put. But you have, again, this is an information item. You have a whole month to think about it, because next month when it's an actual action item, you can say, yeah, I'd like to move that $5 million down to $3 million or whatever.
And so if
you
we
guys
make
want
it
to think
5,
about.
it just becomes an administrative tip amendment, and it still goes, to the board and all of that. So
No.
just, oh, they don't go to the board?
No.
Oh, that's right.
I
they
can
don't.
bring it to you as an information item,
There you go.
and that's something we could do instead
I just
if
picked
you don't
5
want it.
because it was the same as Dr. Cog's.
Yeah. North Front Range does that too.
The board sees administrative changes, though, right? Aren't they?
Not currently, no.
No.
But that can be a rule that we have.
Yeah. Okay.
Excuse me, we could see I know it's a different entity, but CDOT, I think the TC sees anything that's over $1 million. If I have that number right.
And if the estimate is over 20%, if there's a difference between the engineering estimate.
So we use what you had mentioned earlier.
Yeah, the 10
So
or
like-
20% or over $1 million change
Yeah.
is a
So
thing
from our
that.
perspective, if anything is out of line, somebody's looking at it.
So that means the project could change up to 5 million and not come through as an amendment?
Yes, but that's also, you wouldn't be able to just add 5 million to your project from our funds or anything. It would just be, like, if you're overmatching by that much, you could just tell me and I could add it. Or if you're going, reducing your funds or switching them around. Not switching around, you can't just move the project around, but it would still require you to ask for the money if it's going to be federal money. But yeah.
Actually, I think to move this along, might I suggest we add some things, Catherine, to sort of say when these things, what other things sort of constitute? For example, we had a discussion this morning of what constitutes a scope change that's significant enough that you have to come back to the TAC and do that. So even if you're not changing your dollar amount, if you said that you were going to do 3 miles of roadway and you're only going to do 2.5, well, is that significant, or is it when it gets down to 2? What did you put in your application? So I think we need to maybe flesh out a little bit some more of the rules, or maybe you already have that there and I'm just talking to myself. But and then what it is it's only needs to be an amendment dollar-wise if, for example, CDOT goes through a process and CDOT awards a project. It's not anything that we need to do other than make sure it shows up in our tip. Well, right now, things that you really have no control over that just show up in our tip still have to come through because you need to see it. If we have that dollar amount, those things can just happen and then we're not worried about it, right? So, Wendy?
So if you change the project limits, I have to go into the STIP and change the project limits because they're mapped. So it makes a difference if you change the project limits. If you add or subtract from it, and if you add money, it may require some sort of financial process. So I think that there's a point where you can make things easier, but I also think that there's a point that you need to be careful that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So we have the ability to keep track of what's happening, because we aren't all going to sit here every day of the rest of our lives. Somebody's going to leave, and then that leaves a hole of knowledge.
So what we'll do is we'll sort of take this particular thing and send it to you, this particular policy, as an email with some of a little more fleshed out of what constitutes those changes like Wendy's talking about. And then that way you can really think, okay, I don't need to worry about these things because they need to become an amendment anyway. It's more of these other things that's just a dollar amount. So then am I comfortable with 5 million or $1 million or whatever? I don't think we've given you quite enough information. So we'll do that, and then that way when it comes back next time, you'll be better armed. Is that a fair thing to do?
Yep.
Since you're going to be doing all the work? All right.
That's fair. As long as they want me to do it, I will do it.
Yeah, I would say so far this is probably the most complicated one because it's like open-ended.
Yeah, this one, it was a new suggestion, so I didn't have the suggested new policy in there.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, if you could send that out in email, that
Yes, I will
would be
do
very
that.
helpful.
Okay. So 12.0 goes along with that consistent with or listed in language that we talked about before, but this is talking about amendments also need to be, or amendments may not add projects that are not consistent with the adopted LRTP, so instead of that are not listed in, that's a language change there as well. So
Looks good.
everyone's okay
Any
with
objections?
B there?
Hope not, otherwise then.
Wendy has an objection. No, Wendy has a question.
It's not consistent with what you said.
So I don't really have a question, but I have a comment. So let's say, for instance, the adopted long-range transportation plan has this set of criteria, and then President Trump comes along and says, hey, we can do this, because he's an out-of-the-box thinker, and it's not consistent, then we can't put projects with that money here, because you said amendments may not be added, may not add projects that are not consistent with the LRP. So there could be something, I think you need to tweak this one too somehow. Because sometimes that kind of stuff does happen.
Well, that's a federal rule that we can't change.
Right.
You have to be in the long-range plan, consistent with the long-range plan to be in the TIP.
Yeah.
So if if the president, by executive order, says you no longer have, I'm not sure that he even knows what a long-range plan is or a TIP, but for some reason he says, yes, you no longer, we're going to waive that requirement, that's no longer necessary, we can certainly come back and amend the policies, but the policy right now is consistent with what the federal rules are.
So you would have to make a plan amendment, though, to put the money in, and sometimes it evaporates before you can get that done.
Wouldn't we have to do that with option A anyway? Because it clearly wouldn't be listed on the long-range plan if it's
So
something
I'm
he just
saying
came
that maybe
up with out of the
We
blue.
need to think about that, that's
Yeah,
all.
actually, this actually gives us more flexibility.
Okay.
This is, again, saying it just needs to be consistent with. Where it mirrors that first thing we talked about.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right, and then the final one in the memo is procedure in the memo.
Oh, in the memo, okay.
Sorry, my voice speaks. Too much talking. Suggested new procedure 6.0. So after the development of the draft tip, this coincides with the new public participation plan that Jason's not there, but that you just approved.
Every time.
It's like, where did he go? So this goes along with that you just approved. And so we need to give TAC 30 days before recommendation with any public comments. So instead of just giving it to you, the comments to you at the same time that we're asking approval, we give you the comments, give you 30 days with those comments, and then give you, and then bring it back to you for approval for the final tip document. And before that, we give the public 30 days to comment. So there's essentially a 60 days instead of a 30-day. And so that's just to add that in to coincide with the other rules procedures that we have.
Okay, any other guidance for Catherine?
No, just thank you for looking at my comments and taking them into consideration. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah,
And it
great
was,
comments.
yeah. Was there anything else that I didn't touch on here that you wanted to bring up to the group?
Not at this time.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're all done with 7B, but don't go anywhere because you got 7C.
I'm not used to talking this much. I'm shy. Okay. So
You'll get over that soon enough.
I'm going to have to. I have too many memos. Okay. So this one is for the 2045 draft chapter review, batch 2. And since last month we discussed, there's now 3 batches because we're still working on our financial chapter and another one, freight and economics. And we're also going to bring you the appendices, which most of them are documents that you've already seen or approved. I just wanted to make sure that everything gets to you so you know exactly what's going in this plan. And so we're releasing batch 2 now, and those are listed there with a link. If you have any issues with the link, just, you can contact me and I'll make sure you get it. And then we also, based on your suggestions from last time, we've extended the comment period to August 2nd. And so we would like all comments on all the batches once they're released by August 2nd. And then we're going to do the public comment period now in October instead of in August. So we've extended that, which also means that planned final approval won't happen until January 2020. But that'll still give us plenty of time to get it to Federal Highway. So with that, take any questions.
Any questions for Catherine? Anybody? Well, thank you, Catherine. All right, item 8, member entity announcements. Anybody? No?
I'll say that the Lieutenant Governor is coming to CDOT HQ during the STAC meeting and going to announce and kick off our statewide long-range plan and announce how we're going to every county in the state to start the conversation, followed up by transportation planning region meetings as well. So that's something that's going on.
I'll thank Brian for covering for me last month. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, items for future TAC meetings.
If no one has anything they'd like us, Wendy?
So we have roll forwards, don't forget.
Roll forwards.
We talked about that this morning, and you were supposed to bring that up today?
Oh, was that today? So, well, I just want to make sure I don't, come on up, yeah, I don't want to promise you to do something. But at this point, you'll look through the tip, see who's got funds that need to roll forward, and then you'll contact them, and then they've got to give us something in writing that says, yes, we still want this project, and we need to roll the funds forward. Once we have that in writing, is that the process?
Yeah, pretty much anything that's in the tip columns that are 2018 rollover or 2019 at this point, and you're not going to start obligating in federal fiscal year 2019, they need to get rolled over into 2020 so that they're in the, well, our tip is listed in federal fiscal year.
But it's a state fiscal year.
Okay.
They need to have roll forwards, otherwise they're not there for budgeting.
Okay, so if they're not going to obligate within the state fiscal year, then they need to get rolled over to 2020 federal fiscal year.
And
But
you'll,
I'll let you
and
know
you'll
if you
lay
need
that
to.
all out in the email for
Yes,
us?
I will let you know if your project is one of these that needs to get rolled over.
Thank you.
And this will be by next TAC meeting.
Yeah, if Wendy says that's when we need it, then that's when we need it.
I need it in July when the system comes back up, so I can make sure your money's in the right year. So I just need it by July 1st.
Does
So
this
we
go to the
got
board? No.
Doesn't have to go to anybody,
No,
right?
because
You just need
they're
it by
still
July.
Administrative.
Yeah. But
So
we just need to
it-
have,
At this point, Catherine will look to see who it applies to. So basically, you'll get an email from Catherine that says, by this date, return an email to her that says, yes, please do what you've asked me that you want me to do, right? And then you'll be good.
Okay.
And I think, Wendy, you wanted a small explanation on why these funds are being rolled over.
so we need to have that for Jeff, because if he
Okay.
asks, I want to be able to say, yes, we have a reason. This is, we're waiting on environmental, the plans are at 30%, we need 60%, or, I mean, it just has to be that simple. It doesn't have to be really detailed. I just need to have a small explanation as to why. And that way, when he asks me, Wendy, the 25 million grew to 27 million, how did you let that happen? I can say, oh, but wait, this is how it happened, and this is what we're doing. So I want to be able to have an explanation for each of those roll forwards this time, because he's tasked us with a year of getting this in place, and we're almost there, but we didn't quite make the June deadline for some of the projects to be able to bring that balance into obligated status. So when I get asked, and I will get asked, I just want to be sure that we have the right explanations for the project.
So that, when you reply to the email, I will be requesting a short explanation as to what's going on with the project for the rollover.
So back to the items for future meetings, as long as you're here, you wanted to bring back the pavement, but not the traffic counts, is that right, or is it both?
Yes. Well, I wanted to discuss that we have some funds for either traffic counts or pavement data collection, and speaking with individual jurisdictions, it seems like pavement data has been the priority for this year and not traffic counts, so I wanted to bring that forward and kind of just see who's interested, and Colorado Springs has said that they're willing to let others join in on their pavement collection contract, so I'll talk more about it next month.
Okay. And so that'll be on the agenda, as well as, again, the continuing items for the long-range plan. The other thing is, again, when we did the strategic plan, we had the board come back and say, hey, we'd like you to do a tri-county study. In talking with some of you, I think some of you saw maybe some marginal value in that, is maybe a good way of putting it. To add more value, we were looking at seeing if it can act a little more like a reasonably significant route study to help maybe preserve some corridors that you all agree would be of value. So that might be something that is the value add. So Jason's actually working on the scope of that right now. So hopefully that'll be something that we bring back to you, because I think we need to kind of take that into the TPR process that she mentioned. Sorry, I just can't figure my words. To make sure that gets funded. So that would be something that's down the line. If it's not next month, it'll be the month after. I don't know what your deadline is, Wendy, and I don't know how far Jason is, but Jason usually knocks things out pretty quick. So if it's not next month, it'll be the next month. We'll bring you a scope and start that discussion of, again, At the strategic planning level, it's something that's been requested, and again, to be responsive, we're going to do it. That being said, you around the table can help us make sure that we get the most bang for the buck and the most value out of the deliverables from that. So we want to get something to you guys to get your input. So with that, I think that sort of talks about the future items. Jason, Catherine, anything else that we want to bring in the near future? We're good? That's it for us.
Yes.
If I may ask a question, which I probably should have asked during our review of the TIP policies, just on the timeline for the call for projects, where are we with the current TIP and the future TIP?
So I'll stall while Catherine comes on up, but I believe, so the current TIP is already established, and that would be, if there's funds that are available. Right now, there are no funds available because as of agenda item 2 or whatever it was, actually 6A, we programmed those funds. So right now for the current TIP, there are none. For the next TIP, Catherine will release a notice of funding availability or a call for project, depending on how you want. Is the glass half full or half empty? In November or
October.
October, and at this point, there's no sense in me saying stuff that you're just going to have to correct anyway. So go ahead.
So this fall, October, is when the call for projects will occur, and the planned years for notice of funding will be, I always mix this up, 23 and 24. And so the last 2 years of the current TIP will move forward, and then we'll do a call for the next 2 years. And then the planned approval of that process will be in the spring of 2020, and then that will go into effect October 1, of 2020, which would be federal fiscal year 2021.
So if I heard you correctly, any new projects in the TIP would not be funded until 2023?
And yes, and that's federal fiscal year 2023, so that would be technically October 1, 2022.
Okay, got it.
The only caveat to that is every time we do the TIP, we would do a review of our funding availability. So if there is, I think the CDOT term is money falls from the sky. So if there is a reauthorization, if there is some sort of bill, and there are funds available to us, again, those will all go through that process where we would say in 2020, currently we have 15 million programmed and 15 million available. However, due to this new program, there's an additional 5 million that's available. You all as a group, we would not unilaterally do it. You all as a group would decide, are we moving projects forward? Are we allowing new TIP projects? But that would be the only case that would happen, and I'm not thinking that's very likely. But however, if something were to come up, that would be how it would be handled.
Tim?
Does that include TAP monies or TAP funds for call for projects?
In 23 and 24?
That is a new process here for me. I'm not sure that.
But yes, it would.
You could do it together.
Process.
Is it?
Usually.
You'll be able to do that as part of your call for projects for the years that you need to have programs. And our call for projects, I'm hoping should be happening here next week. For the region. And I think our, we kind of hoped that we'd be underway with that process already, because usually we start right after the beginning of the year. But with changes with headquarters, it's been delayed some. And our next call is, so I would have 21, 22, and 23. Is what we'll be calling for. And I'm assuming that we still see our rough estimate of $5 million a year as federal. We have 20% match. And I believe that the multimodal options funding from the legislature through SO1 will be part of that call for projects. That's kind of the direction that's why it's been kind of delayed at this point. Yeah, how do you address that? That was one of my next questions. Where is that? So we will have that piece that comes to the region, and then PPACG has a piece that they'll be able to make a call for themselves. So I don't know, we should probably do some coordination once we know how things are really going to work out.
Right. I think at the last stack, they handed out the distribution list and said, this is what's going to the TC, and I gave you my only copy. Probably shouldn't have done that, but I gave my copy to Brian and said, hey, I want to make sure MMT saw it as our transit partner, since you guys are far more plugged in. So did you guys have an opportunity to look at that? Is it any surprises there, or it was good? Okay, good.
Any other comments, questions, items, anything? Okay, we are adjourned.
She loves that gavel. So that's my draft so far. Good. Please, let's do that.